This time, Ed's opponent is Lee, an officer of the South Korean Navy Special Forces. He wants to show everyone the true strength of the South Korean Navy. The challenge this time takes place in central Kazakhstan, a region known for having the largest population of wolves in the world. It's a massive labyrinth filled with ditches and dead ends everywhere. Many explorers have been forced to give up halfway when attempting to cross this treacherous land. Both contestants will start from the same point, make their way through the maze ahead, and then walk 90 kilometers west along the river. Whoever reaches the mountaintop first will be the winner. At the referee's signal, both contestants dashed out at the same time. The competition had officially begun. Both of them dashed wildly into the maze without a second thought. Lee, not paying attention, immediately ran into a dead end. To make matters worse, he accidentally got hit on the head by a falling rock, and it looked really painful. Ed used the sun to confirm his position, feeling confident and ready to head south. But unexpectedly, a 50-meter high cliff stood in his way. He was now stuck too. Feeling helpless and frustrated, Ed had no choice but to climb a nearby mountain to get a better view and figure out the right direction. At first glance, everything except for one narrow alley turned out to be a dead end. The terrain here was incredibly treacherous, and his map had completely stopped working. But Ed had no other choice. He had to keep moving forward. Ed had a tough first night. He slept leaning against a rock wall the entire night. Whether he liked it or not, he had to head back out and continue the challenge. At the moment, both of them are still inside the maze, and their progress is nearly identical. Ed found a skeleton on the road and used it as a foothold. Although it had long since dried out, its sturdiness was beyond question. Before long, he had climbed to the top of the mountain. From a distance, Ed spotted Lee's position, and Lee saw him too. They both locked eyes, and instantly, the pace picked up as they began to run faster toward the summit. Both of them reached the edge of the cliff. Just as Ed was hesitating, Lee boldly slid down without a second thought. Ed stood there stunned for a moment, shocked by Lee's daring move. Warning: do not try what Lee just did. It's extremely dangerous and should never be attempted. After climbing down, Ed found a small pool of water. He took a big gulp to rehydrate himself, then looked around for a shaded spot to rest, trying to escape the scorching 40°C heat. Lee reached a cave and hoped that by going through it, he could escape the maze faster and secure the victory. After crawling inside for a while, he was surprised to find that the exit was wide open. After nightfall, Ed also began to run with renewed strength. Not long after, he managed to escape the maze. Since he had rested well during the day, he was now ready to continue his journey through the night. By the third day, Ed had stayed up all night pushing forward and managed to catch up in progress. He decided to rest at his current spot and look for some food. Meanwhile, Lee took a shortcut to reach the riverside quickly, immediately showcasing his impressive swimming skills. Ed noticed wild rabbits all around him, so he set traps in the area where they were most active. He blocked both sides with tree branches so that any rabbit passing through would surely get caught. Then, he ran into the tall reeds, trying to drive all the rabbits toward his trap. After a while, one wild rabbit was successfully caught. Ed happily roasted it over a fire and enjoyed his well-earned meal. In the evening, while searching for food, Lee stumbled upon some dried fish on the shore. Since it was inedible, he decided to use it as bait. He attached it to a fishing line and set his rod along the bank. In the middle of the night, he suddenly heard the line twitching. A large catfish had hooked itself. Quickly, Lee hauled it in and took it back to his camp. He roasted the fish and enjoyed a delicious meal. By the fourth day, Lee had crafted a simple raft for crossing the river. It looked a bit basic, but it was functional. On the other side, Ed had also reached the riverbank. He made a circle using reeds and then tightly tied camel skin around it. A simple raft was ready. Since he couldn't use the raft at night, Ed planned to set off in the morning. Time quickly passed, and the final day arrived. Both competitors were entering the home stretch. The distance between them was now around 800 meters. However, given Lee's youth and strength, he quickly caught up with Ed. Realizing that his speed couldn't match Lee's, Ed abandoned the raft and climbed onto the shore. Lee, using all his strength, made it to the shore. In the distance, he could see the final sand dune. But despite Lee's effort, Ed was still the first to reach the finish line. His opponent in this challenge was Kat, a survival expert with 25 years of experience teaching primitive survival skills. When she was a child, her father had left her in the forest to survive on her own. She is the most promising female competitor capable of beating Ed. The location of this challenge is set on an archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. The environment here is home to many dangerous carnivorous creatures. The two contestants are placed on the northern and southern sides of the island. They must travel 120 kilometers through dense forest and open seas. The first to reach the old ship at the center will win the challenge. When both contestants jumped into the sea, the challenge officially began. They both tried to swim as fast as they could toward the shore. Before long, Kat reached the shore first. She planned to head north to gather as many resources as possible. Ed, however, still wanted to enjoy the sea and wasn't ready to get out of the water just yet. Freshwater must be the first priority when you're surrounded by the vast ocean. While searching for clean water, Kat suddenly caught a strong chemical smell. She guessed that it might be related to the area having gone through a war. Drums of oil, remnants from World War II, could be seen scattered everywhere nearby. Ed also made it to the shore and noticed a lot of trash and plastic bottles scattered along the beach. He cut a plastic bottle in half and placed it on the ground to collect rainwater, so he could drink fresh water naturally. First, Ed needed to head towards the small island ahead. Luckily, the water level wasn't deep, and he could walk across, saving his energy instead of swimming. However, he didn't expect that in less than 10 minutes, a massive storm would hit, and the water quickly became deeper. With no other option, he continued moving forward, eventually reaching the shore just before nightfall. That evening, he could only find a spot nearby to rest and sleep for the night. On the other hand, Kat had a peaceful sleep while Ed was out searching for her. The next day, Ed was making his way towards the center of the island. The path was treacherous, with sharp volcanic rocks that posed a serious danger if he accidentally cut himself. Along the way, the thorny leaves also scraped at him painfully. Every step was a battle, and the cuts and scratches seemed endless. Despite the overwhelming pain and exhaustion, Ed pushed forward with all his remaining strength and, after what felt like an eternity, he finally managed to get through the hazardous area. Kat reached a mangrove forest, and at this time, there were crocodiles in the water. She had to cross quickly before the tide rose. Beneath the dense tree roots ahead was a perfect spot for crocodiles to ambush, but despite her fear, she had no choice. She could only step on the higher tree roots as much as possible. After a while, she reached the shore. She needed to get to the island ahead, but she was certain she wouldn't be able to swim there. She thought about crafting a raft made of wood to cross over. There were many dry branches around, perfect for use as the raft's frame. Ed was thinking about catching seafood, as it would be a waste not to eat them while on the island. He made a simple trap from a coconut, and now all he had to do was wait for his prey to come. The rain continued to pour, and a strong storm was approaching. Kat could only pray silently, hoping that the weather would clear up as soon as possible. Some were happy, others were sad. When Ed went to check his coconut trap, he found a massive coconut crab. Its powerful claws were so strong that they could easily crack open a coconut. Ed enjoyed a 5-star dinner with roasted coconut crab. On the third day, the weather seemed to improve, and Kat began improving her raft. She needed to gather scraps of fabric and tie them together to make a sail. On his side, Ed was searching for a fresh water source on the island. He found a large, rusted metal barrel that could be used to boil water. He crafted a makeshift water filtration system using plastic tubes and a metal basket. Then, he boiled seawater in the barrel, and the steam condensed through the pipes, creating fresh water. After 30 minutes, his homemade fresh water was ready. To protect his eyes, Ed ground some charcoal powder and applied it around his eyes to reduce the glare from the sun. Before making the raft, he sketched it out on the sand. Afterward, he collected bamboo and wood, then began assembling the raft. Everything was going smoothly, and the raft was coming together well. It looked quite sturdy and functional. On this side, Kat was preparing to set off. She had to quickly assemble a sail. While Kat was still on the island, Ed had already sailed a few kilometers on his raft, leaving Kat far behind in terms of distance. It took Kat the entire day, and by evening, she still hadn't finished the sail. Meanwhile, Ed was drifting in the sea, with no land in sight. He had no choice but to sleep on the raft. The production crew was terrified witnessing this, and in the middle of the night, he was woken up by the cold. With no other option, Ed decided to continue toward the island ahead to get to the shore and rest. By the fourth day, with only 10 kilometers left to the finish line, Ed immediately set off early in the morning. Meanwhile, Kat had finally completed her large raft. The time spent had not been in vain, as once the raft hit the water, it started to float smoothly, carried by the wind. A moment later, both of them arrived at the island where the shipwreck had occurred. Ed thought he would lose, feeling discouraged as he walked towards the referee. However, when he learned that he was the first to arrive, he was overjoyed to find out that he had won the challenge. Paddling a boat while catching fish, surviving only by drinking water from banana trees, and savoring rich, creamy taro. Those were just some of the things Ed did in this challenge. His opponent? Matt Roy, a true survival expert who once took part in a 21-day survival series. And his swimming skills? Definitely no joke. With a total straight-line distance of about 65 kilometers, whoever reaches the lighthouse first will be the winner. The challenge hasn't even started yet, and Ed already asks the referee, asterisk, if there's an accident, is there a rescue helicopter? Asterisk. But the referee's answer left Ed completely speechless. What do you think the referee said? Drop your guesses in the comments below. We're dying to hear them. The very first task after the challenge began was to reach land. Both of them swam like mad toward the island ahead. It didn't take long before Matt set foot on the island and immediately started searching for shelter. Though night was already falling, Ed was still drifting on the sea. It wasn't until late at night that he finally reached the shore, his limbs weak and exhausted. He lay down on the rocks and fell asleep. Things seemed to be getting better when Ed woke up early in the morning. However, his surfboard had mysteriously disappeared without any reason. This frightened him even more than going without food for 9 meals over 3 days. In a panic, he rushed around the island to search for it. Matt had a great night's sleep. When he woke up, he also found fresh water, something even more precious than finding gold. Ed's efforts were finally rewarded. He found his surfboard just as the tide began to rise, filling him with joy. But now, he had another mission, finding food. He stumbled upon a giant taro root and, without a second thought, cut off a piece and ate it raw. The result? His tongue went numb the moment he bit into it. Guys, don't try this at home. Definitely don't follow Ed's example. Just a few meters ahead, he found a few banana trees. It's known that banana trunks contain a good amount of clean water, perfect for rehydration. He carved a large hole into the trunk and began to enjoy his first sweet sips of fresh water on the island. Meanwhile, Matt was taking a swim in the sea when he noticed quite a few plastic bags and other plastic waste floating near the island. Curious, he swam back to shore to investigate. There, he found a surprising amount of plastic debris, but it looked like he might be able to salvage a few useful items from it. Even so, Matt reminded himself, and wants to remind everyone, that we must protect the environment. Please don't litter and always dispose of waste responsibly. On this side of the island, Ed was starting a fire to prepare some roasted taro, a fairly easy task for someone like him. After getting the fire going, he built a simple shelter using bamboo and tree leaves right next to the fire. While waiting for the taro to cook, Ed made the most of his time by crafting a wooden paddle, hoping it would help him navigate the sea more easily the next day. Finally, he got to enjoy his delicious, rich, and creamy roasted taro, a well-earned treat after a long, hard day. On the other side of the island, Matt was working on his dream of building a large boat. He tied floats to both sides of a bamboo log and secured them tightly. After a full day of hard work, he finally took a rest to prepare for tomorrow's journey. By the third day, Matt looked at his bicycle and came up with a bold idea. He secured the bike onto the raft, hoping he could pedal across the sea. Next, he crafted a few propeller-like fins and attached them to the tires. These would act like paddles. The final step was testing it out. Matt pedaled with excitement and realized everything was working just fine. Well, except for one thing. The chain snapped. Ed's approach was much simpler. All he needed were 4 bamboo poles and his trusty surfboard. Just like that, his raft was complete. Matt hadn't eaten in 3 days. It was time to get some calories. He made a spear gun out of bamboo and a rubber band to catch some fish. Just then, he spotted an eel swimming in the water. He took aim and fired a precise shot, taking down the eel. He enjoyed part of it raw as fresh sashimi and saved the rest to make smoked eel for longer preservation. On the morning of the fourth day, Matt set off in a hurry, bringing with him some smoked eel meat and a wooden paddle as his essential supplies. As for Ed, he was standing on a high point, observing the wind direction. Based on his judgment, the wind was blowing toward the final destination. To get ahead of Matt, he decided to harness the power of the wind. He crafted a sail using palm leaves and his jacket, then made a bow and arrows from bamboo branches and shoelaces. Standing on the beach, he fired several arrows into the water one after another, but not a single creature surfaced. He was so frustrated, he couldn't even speak. Matt seemed to be thoroughly enjoying himself on his raft, paddling along while snacking, living his best life. This was about as perfect as it gets. But perhaps a 21-day survival challenge with someone of the opposite sex would be even more interesting. The final day of the challenge had arrived. With the help of the eastern wind, Ed's raft was flying across the water like an arrow. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Why not catch a fish right now? He grabbed his bow and took a shot. Luckily, he managed to catch a large sea fish weighing several kilos. He ate it raw to enjoy its freshness, and at that moment, his body was bursting with energy. Matt, exhausted from paddling for too long, had completely run out of energy. In contrast, Ed Stafford was still full of strength, powering forward with ease. He surged ahead and crossed the finish line first, claiming victory. His next opponent is someone truly special. His name is Hakeem. He's a survival expert and an American ninja with 22 years of martial arts experience. When the two first met, Hakeem told Ed that he had watched his survival shows and was a big fan of his skills. That's why he was eager to challenge Ed in a head-to-head survival showdown. The challenge takes place in the Zooij Marsh, located on the eastern edge of the Tibetan Plateau. This area is also known as the highest altitude marshland in the world. From here, both will trek 70 kilometers west through wetland terrain, then swim across a massive lake. Whoever reaches the opposite shore first will be declared the winner. At the referee's signal, the challenge begins. For Ed, walking through water wasn't his strength, so heading uphill was the smartest choice. After trekking for a while, the rain began to fall. Taking advantage of the downpour, he collected some extra water. At the same time, he even found a wildflower and happily munched on it like a tasty little snack. Hakeem, on the other hand, went straight into the marshland, and that turned out to be his biggest mistake. The terrain was far more difficult to move through than he had expected. Stuck and struggling, he decided to rely on his ninja skills. He started waving his hands, moving his legs in a strange rhythm, and chanting some mysterious incantation, and then Ed appeared, now making his way through the high mountain region. Thick fog surrounded him, making it nearly impossible to see. He could only move forward one slow, careful step at a time along the steep cliffside. One wrong move here, and it could end in a tragic accident. Not far from there, Hakeem also reached the southern mountainous forest, where natural resources were abundant and could be put to good use. He entered a cave and found some dry grass, quickly stuffed it into a bamboo tube he had picked up earlier, then sealed one end to make it easier to carry and keep it from getting wet. He discovered some fresh wolf droppings nearby. With the instincts of a ninja, he knew he had to leave this dangerous place as quickly as possible to avoid a potential encounter with a pack of aggressive wolves. Ed seemed to have better luck. He found a cave right up the hill. Taking the opportunity, he cut down some bushes to make a makeshift bed. Completely exhausted after a full day of travel, he went to sleep early. Meanwhile, Hakeem didn't want to rely entirely on the power of ninjutsu. He decided to use his own strength to start a fire, but unfortunately, that night he had to sleep without one. The next morning, he woke up with his body freezing cold, so he did a few martial arts moves to warm himself up. Meanwhile, Ed was following the sound of water and arrived at a stream that seemed to flow from the other side of the mountain, so he felt safe enough to drink from it. Somehow, his tooth mysteriously disappeared and never came back. He spotted a few goat tracks on the ground, and based on his experience, he figured that following the tracks downhill would eventually lead him to the foot of the mountain. Finally, our ninja managed to make fire successfully. He used a bamboo tube to heat the water before drinking it, then continued on his journey. Ed had reached the vast swamp, and the water ahead was getting deeper and deeper. This was a clear disadvantage for someone like him. He couldn't keep moving forward this way, so he had to turn back and look for another solution. First, he headed into the forest to look for shelter. He found a flat piece of land, perfect for setting up a simple camp, not only to shield himself from the wind, but also to protect against the rain. After that, Ed began searching for materials to start a fire. In just a few moments, he managed to light it up. For dinner, he roasted some frogs over the coals to regain as much strength as possible. Hakim finally arrived at the swamp, but he couldn't find anywhere to sleep. So, he decided to rest outdoors and spend the night under the open sky. The third day arrived, and despite heavy rain the night before, Ed's shelter was perfect. He stayed completely dry. He gathered materials to build a raft, preparing to cross the swamp. He also found some protein from insects and popped the rich, fatty bugs directly into his mouth. Our ninja is out searching for food when a mouse in the distance blocks his path. He quickly crafts a shuriken from 2 small branches. With ninja-like precision, he throws it toward the mouse. Bullseye? As expected from a true ninja, the shuriken lands perfectly, giving him a delicious roasted mouse meal. Ed is currently building a raft. He gathers branches, arranges them neatly, and ties them together. To finish it off, he adds a layer of grass on top. It looks solid until he climbs aboard. The moment he sits down, the whole raft sinks like a rock. Maybe Ed's not as light as he thought. Not giving up, he tried a different method. Ed rolled the grass into circular bundles, wrapped them with animal hide, and placed them back under the raft. And finally, it worked. The raft floated. Now that night had fallen, crossing the swamp would be too dangerous, so Hakim decided to wait until morning to continue his journey. He used a bit of tinder and successfully made a fire. At this point, the 2 men were on opposite ends of the swamp. Only 20 kilometers remained to reach the final destination. By the 4th day, Hakim also began his journey across the swamp. He crafted a special pair of shoes from his throwing stars to help him traverse the swampy terrain. Ed paddled through the night and finally reached the other side of the swamp. Luckily, there was no more swamp ahead. Not long after, Hakim caught up. Ed had chosen to go around to the right, while Hakim, by chance, picked the left path, a route that was 2 to 3 kilometers longer than Ed's. In the end, Ed was the first to reach the finish line and claim the victory.